We're live.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Ensmore, and this is November 28th meeting of the full council of the Village of Gulf Manor. If you would stand as you're able to get us started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Mr. Prednoff, would you do a roll call, please?
Gladly. Ms. Cheney.
Here.
Mr. Fisher. Mr. Knipp.
Here.
Mr. Marks.
Here.
Ms. Snyder.
Here.
Mr. Van Harn.
Here.
And my understanding is that Mr. Fisher is on his way, that he has texted and said that he's en route. So if there's a motion to excuse.
Motion to excuse.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Without objection, I'll take that as unanimous. And let's see, has everyone had an opportunity to look at the agenda? One of the things that I was noticing is we put all of the we put the solicitor report up front. The rationale for that was because the appropriations ordinance amendment is hugely important for us to get done tonight. So if anybody needs to leave early and we haven't gotten to that yet, that would be a significant problem. So what I'm going to propose is that we do the appropriations up front and then save the rest of the ones that we can have more discussion of during the regular period of time during the solicitor's report. Other than that, I also know that there's going to be a request for an executive session, which I presume will be at the very end of our meeting this evening. And anybody else have any suggestions or amendments to make to the agenda? And if not, and if you're in agreement with what I've stated, is there a motion to accept as amended?
I'll make a motion to accept as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. We don't have anyone registered to speak this evening. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at the minutes from our previous council meeting, which was the 14th of November? And if so, are there any amendments to it? And if not, do we have a motion to accept the minutes from November 14th?
Motion to accept.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Great, thank you. All right, Mr. Donilon.
Thank you. We have ordinance number 2022-10. It's an appropriation ordinance. May I have a motion to read this by title only?
Motion to read by title only.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And this is an ordinance to amend appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the Village of Gulf Manor for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2022. We need a motion to approve and a second.
Motion to approve?
Second.
And this, before you call the roll, this is just catching up on some of the accounting, particularly with the purchase of the Shepherd property owned by Mr. Bean, which we closed on. Money was exchanged last Wednesday. So we are now the titled owners. And this is to clear up the budget appropriation for the monies that came in from the county. So we received them and we moved them over to send them back out.
And I'm aware that the Finance Committee has a recommendation for accepting the appropriations. Is that correct, Ms. Cheney?
Sure.
And I want to thank our fiscal officer for taking the time to, my understanding is he met with every single council member to go over it line by line and discuss his understanding of it and answer any questions. I certainly was grateful that he took the time to do that with me, so thank you. And anyone watching, anyone who's curious about council business and has questions about that, you certainly speak to me or the administration about getting some of our fiscal officer's time to go into that detail. It's very helpful. And any other discussion?
Roll call vote.
Have a roll call, please.
Ms. Cheney.
Yes.
Mr. Knipp.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher is absent. Mr. Marks.
Yes.
Ms. Snyder.
Yes.
Mr. Van Harn.
Yes.
And I need a motion to suspend the second and third reading of the ordinance, so it'll take effect immediately. And just a note of correction, it's 2022-11.
Yeah.
That's already corrected in minutes. I copied it all.
Motion to suspend second and third readings.
Is there a second? Does it have to be roll?
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Cheney?
Yes.
Mr. Knipp?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher is absent. Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Van Horn?
Yes.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, so my report, number of things. First, I believe that everyone had an opportunity to read the email from the administration concerning the Housing Council appointee roles. I had asked at our previous council meeting for a paragraph to be written up about that so that when we're approaching potential appointees, we can tell them with clarity what they're getting themselves into. My understanding is that we have enough appointees already in the village that can join this housing council. So we need to kind of get on it and talk to them about the willingness to do that. I believe that I share all of council's opinion that to the degree that we can expand the number of people in the community that we're appointing to these kind of things, that the better it is for the community. So I would encourage, one of the things that was left out of the email was that there was no expectation that we would be doing this tonight, getting all that finalized tonight. The Planning Commission, I believe on the 5th of December, will be making their recommendation for who they will be appointing to the Planning Commission. I'm going to read the paragraph so that it's recorded, and anyone that's in our community that's interested in this will know what they would be getting into if they're interested. So first off, how it works is I'll be making 2 appointments, and I will announce those to administration probably by email, and let everybody know who the 2 are that I'm appointing. I just got the description yesterday, so I'll be getting my look here this week. Council will make 2 recommendations, and there'll be one recommendation from the Planning Commission and 2 internally from the Housing Council themselves. So does that mean once we create the Housing Council, then they can get 2 more people?
Correct.
All right. Let's see. So the responsibility is to review applications and the recommendation of the village administrator concerning those applications, and make a recommendation to our council when they reviewed that. So the applications that they're reviewing are ones where folks are asking for a tax abatement, all right, because of their business, because of their the business that they're building in the community, the amount of jobs that will be coming in. Oftentimes a business will ask for a tax abatement from the village, and there's a process to go through for that. And this is this Housing Council committee reviews that, all right? It has effects on our local schools, of course. What our tax base has an effect on, this affects that, right? So those members themselves, they'll review the application and may ask the applicant to appear and answer their questions. In making a decision, they will weigh a number of factors such as the amount requested versus the earnings taxes which will be received. Will this revitalize the community, and underutilized property? Could this be the impetus to spur further development? What jobs and earnings taxes will it produce? What are the hiring practices? How soon can we expect expansion in hiring? What will be the long-term investment in improving the property? What is the company's history of growth? And will this help the company? Of course, will it help the community as well? So anyone listening who's interested in playing a role in that kind of an evaluation of an application, certainly encourage you to talk to your members of council about your interest in joining that committee. So the current timetable, as I said, December 5th is, I believe, will be the first kind of formal public appointment, which will be by the Planning Commission. And what time is that Planning Commission meeting?
6:30.
6:30 p.m.
Since I wasn't there, can I ask a couple questions about it?
Absolutely.
So is this leaning toward commercial properties the way it's described, or?
That's my understanding. I know that there's been, not all companies are aware that this even exists. So that's part of, being very public about this going on, is to make sure that folks know that this process exists. And,
When this was past 30 years ago, the intent was to revitalize the Weehee Road corridor by trying to incentivize businesses to stay here, grow here. So a lot of the standards that we use to determine how much of an abatement can be given are value added to the property, number of jobs, payroll that's brought in, and then there's a general category of revitalizing an underutilized property. So a lot of communities use it for housing improvements. It's always been geared toward business improvements.
Is the council going to be given some general strategies or best practices on abatements? Because I know about this much about it, but.
yeah, I specifically asked our solicitor, I had a
Okay.
conversation today about making sure that we had some examples of what other communities have done, and maybe some examples of where it's gone bad.
Great.
And we can back out as well. Can you
Yes,
speak to that?
if we have an agreement that says you'll add so many jobs, you'll add so much payroll, and they do not, the housing council can then revoke all or part of the abatement. This applicant, I believe, came to us through Hamilton County Community Development, Alloy now. Correct. So Alloy was advocating, and I think they're getting some support from the state level too. And then Alloy through Daniel Ferguson was going to give us an analysis of what they're going to do, what they're going to bring, what we're going to reap in terms of earnings tax, and then what we are giving up in exchange for that, and help us make a recommendation. It's not automatic.
Right.
And it's not automatic that you've met this category, you get 5 years. You met this category, you get 5 years. Or you get 100%. So working with Mr. Ferguson, who does these around the county, will have some good guidance as to what would be appropriate.
Well, my general understanding, I think this is good for anybody's listening, at least from what I have, is that generally abatements don't mean zero taxes.
Correct.
They usually, generally, are going to be where they continue to pay maybe the existing property value when they took it over, with no increases or some kind of
Right.
deal after that. So it's not zero, and the benefit is all the things you say. If they bring in 20 employees to an area, that's employee tax or payroll tax for employees. There is all kinds of advantages to doing that. So it's not zero taxes, which is what I hear people always complaining about. That's not true.
Now,
So, okay.
it works really well on a brownfield where it's a
Okay.
clean scrape, because they are building up improvements. It's more difficult when you have an existing building, because again, that pad of land and that existing building already generating a tax which will stay there. So what's the improved value is the intent of it.
Yeah.
And in City of Cincinnati, where it's used many times for housing, it's when someone builds a big addition on their home. It's one of the criticisms we've seen about the Cincinnati program is it incentivizes the Hyde Parks, the Mount Lookouts. It doesn't incentivize housing revitalization in Bond Hill. So
There's a trade-off too, and that I would hope in our analysis we'll see X amount of dollars will be lost in property taxes, but X amount of dollars will be gained in income tax. So hopefully there's a balance that will allow that company to be able to flourish and keeps our industrial park or whatever business area in business.
Okay.
So if you're a resident, you have to be a resident of Gulf Manor to be on the housing council. All right, so just so that's clear, right? So it will be residents that review this and make the recommendation to council. Want to join the administration in thanking the Gulf Manor Police Department and Deer Park Silverton Fire and EMS for a working Thanksgiving while everybody else wasn't. So thank you for that, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Hope you all had a good time with that. I also have a late announcement about Halloween. I intended to do this and completely forgot. You may have seen this map going around on Halloween. I got so much feedback from folks about how helpful it was, and I saw so many people using it, driving around the community, knowing where there was folks that were participating and giving out candy and stuff for kids. This was done by Jeremy Wilkering, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So yeah, he put this together, put it out on social media so people knew that it was available, and a lot of people were using it. So I wanted to very publicly thank him for putting that together, and let him know that I'm sure our community engagement committee may want to use his expertise in putting together things like this in the future. This was a real big hit. So again, thank you, Jeremy, for that. Thanks again to the fiscal officer for setting aside some time for everyone to go through the appropriations budget. I know that was very helpful. And let's see, so Hamilton County has the Hamilton County Planning Partnership is putting on a number of trainings that are free, and they're via Zoom that can help you if you're interested in pursuing a grant for something that you think the village should be pursuing, or if you're involved in a nonprofit, and because these trainings are about grants that are available for nonprofits as well as municipalities. So these are November 30th. So what is that, next day after tomorrow? Yeah, through December 1st. And what times are these? I have the email on this that I can get information to you. So these are the different kinds of topics. You have water and wastewater funding opportunities from the federal infrastructure bill. I'm interested in that one. I know some folks in I'm forgetting the community who talked about some creative ways of using the money that's available, how you're allowed to use it for some infrastructure projects in your community. Things like preparing for competitive grant applications, census data and grant writing, and a number of other topics here. So I'm planning on trying to get to several of them that I'm interested in, particularly because it's made easy being on Zoom and being free. So if anybody else is interested, I have this that I can pass around. Let's see. The Mr. Anderson, who came out from SORTA, the director of development and innovation with SORTA, who came and spoke to council. I had a follow-up with him about next steps with regard to potentially getting some bus stop shelters here in Gulf Manor. We don't have any bus stop shelters here in Gulf Manor, and he has tasked that with their planning team, and I'll be keeping you up to date as they're looking at different locations. The first stage of that is they go around the community and look at where the different bus stops are and look at what would even be possible in terms of doing that in Gulf Manor. And so I'll pass along that information as we get it. I thanked him again for his time coming out here last week. And I attended the First Suburbs Consortium of Southwest Ohio on November 16th. That was an invite. Their executive committee is looking for more people to join it. There's some opportunities through this consortium to work together for like additional funding things, just joint project kind of work. There's a number of opportunities I'm interested in with Lincoln Heights. I've been meeting with the mayor of Lincoln Heights on a number of interesting things that they're working on that we could join them in and maybe beneficial to our residents. So if any of you are interested in attending these meetings, let me know. It's not just for mayors or, it's basically any of the leadership in these communities that are interested in participating in these things. So they met at High Grain Brewery. So if that would further interest you in attending, that's a little nugget of information. I mentioned the last time that we met that the We Thrive is having a 2022 recognition night, and that is December 6th. They had a deadline for, or not a dead, well, it was listed as please RSVP by this particular date, which is passed at this point. But I was able to confirm that you are still able to sign up. It's a free meal and a recognition. All right, so I'm going.
So we have nominees.
Yes,
So
yeah. So I'm hoping that they know.
Jacqueline and Casey.
Right, right. So they, Golf Manor would be recognized for the great work that they're doing with our community. If you would like to attend that, please sign up. The more, the merrier at a table, the better. One of the things that, is anyone planning on going? You're going? Anybody else? All right, awesome. And okay, so if anyone else is interested, I was not aware that you two were going.
I'm going to.
So, all right, cool.
Car leaves at 5.
All right. So that is at 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. at 11555 Whitten Road. That's the Forest Park Senior Center. So there's that. There are 3 resources that I wanted to just end by reviewing here that are relevant to folks in our community. One is in the kind of the topic of Thanksgiving and the gratitude and everything that folks use this time of year to express, pointing out that there's demonstrated evidence that gratitude is actually can help people heal and can help when expressing gratitude. It's a good, healthy thing to do, not just in general for folks, but specifically children who've been raised in traumatic environments often grow up to feel that gratitude is very Pollyanna, and that they have a very difficult time expressing gratitude. And there's demonstrated best practices in how to kind of combat that with children. And there's a number of things here that have to do beyond just modeling it, spending time with them. There's a whole list of things that I have here that you're welcome to take a look at if you're interested. I'm involved with a nonprofit. One of the things that we do is share information like this. So I can also point you to a website that has a bunch of information on how to nurture an attitude of gratitude in children, not just for all children, but especially for folks who've experienced trauma, and not just as a parent, but as a caring adult. The federal student loan repayment pause has been extended. So basically what that is during COVID, folks that had student loans, the payments that were due on those were paused. It's been a couple of years now, I believe, and they were due to expire in January. And the Department of Education was planning on having the loan forgiveness program rolled out and active prior to the expiration of that pause. And because the courts are reviewing whether that program has proper authorization, until that's concluded, they've gone ahead and extended that pause. And what that looks like is until what looks like the Supreme Court makes a decision on whether that has been properly authorized. This would go back into effect. I think they said 90 days, like payments would start becoming due again 90 days after whatever decision is made on that. So that's that information. There is going to be a Medicaid and Marketplace application assistance event on December 6th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Delhi Public Library. So that's for folks who don't get insurance through their employer, whether they be income eligible to get state assistance for the medical insurance, or whether they're trying to figure out how to use the Marketplace stuff that's online. Again, that's from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Delhi Public Library, and I have the address for that. And thank you for your patience with me on all that material. Mr. Hirth, do you have an administration report?
Thank you. To follow up on the grant issue, so one of the things that Mr. Pridnoff is responsible for in his new position is developing a grant committee, something that we've not gotten a lot of traction on yet, but if there are, I'm not sure the grant committee is the right thing to call it yet. We want to find sources for grants. We want to try to find ways of easily having a repository of information that we can go to when we can answer grants in an efficient way. Seems like the process we have now is when something comes up, it's like, oh my gosh, you have to do this. And I don't want that kind of chaos when we have grants coming up. So I know that there are external vendors that are available to us, and there may be volunteers or somebody out in the community that we can engage to actually help us do this process. So long-winded way of saying, if you have an interest in dealing with grant stuff, please touch base with Eric ASAP, because this is something I want to get some traction on and get this going up and running.
And pretty good rundown of how to navigate their website and to see, I mean, just for the grants, which are Ohio-based, it's about 2,900 different grants that we could potentially be eligible for. So yeah, if you're interested in any of that, feel free to reach out and we can set some time to kind of fish through it. But again, just kind of trying to keep things coordinated.
And that's for municipal grants, correct?
It's all grants.
Yeah, but I mean, like specifically for the Village of Gulf Manor.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or I would see that if we hear wind of something for a nonprofit group that a nonprofit might be able to apply for, we certainly would pass that information along. So the other thing I would want to mention too is one of the vehicles that we have for communicating to residents I'd like to see us improve next year. Mr. Pridnoff, getting on the spotlight here, on election day, he and I were talking about people understanding what the 4ML levy was for. And he had explained that he had sent an email to some of his acquaintances and contacts about how that money was going to be used and what the explanation for why we needed it. And I said to him, that's a great idea for an article. So if you go to our website, in the blog, we have an article called "With Thanks for Passing Issue 23 from the Fiscal Officer." This was simply, I only had his picture. This was simply an email that we repurposed and turned it into an informational piece for our residents. There are so many different ways that we can do this, and it's simple stuff that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. It's just a matter of realizing it. Because if I'd really thought about it deeply enough, I would have thought, gee, we should have done this before the election. But it's just an example of some of the ways that I'd like to see us expand our blog on the website. So just kind of pointing that out. And you can get a cool picture of yourself taken too. So
It's been a while.
A few more grays.
Were you 12 in that picture?
Okay, for my report for the evening, the WeHe bid opening will take place this coming Wednesday, November 30th at 11 a.m. That'll happen here in this room. Kind of an interesting process where the people who are bidding, the contractors, come in with their sealed packages. We stack them up on the desk and we open them one by one and read aloud what the bids were. And they stay and listen to that because they take that number information back with them. Elbrook is also going out to bid. It's going to be advertised on December 2nd and December 9th. And if you notice here again on our own website, we also put that information. So today I posted the legal notice for Elbrook. A couple of weeks ago we did WeHe. But that bid opening will be on Wednesday, December 15th at 11 a.m. Englewood and Canterbury, we don't have dates yet. Cincinnati Waterworks is still doing, their bids are out to do that work. And I'm assuming, as Mr. Marks and I were talking earlier today, that the Englewood portion of the water work is probably going to come down with Santiville and connect. So the fact that they're doing it on the south side of the sidewalk there is probably likely to the discussions we've had with the waterworks about not tearing up our intersection of Santiville and Englewood. For property maintenance, Sergeant Reed has been on top of the Stover cul-de-sac area. He reported this morning that the dumping of waste has been curtailed. So it looks like we have a handle on random stuff just appearing up down there. The village continues to emphasize enforcement of property maintenance. We're still waiting on the portable camera that we talked about the last council meeting. It should have been out a week ago, but haven't gotten it yet. Leaf collection, they're caught up. Rosedale and Yosemite are the two priorities from the last round, and they started with La Santiville this afternoon for the second round. This week they should be back on schedule, so we'll be able to observe week number 5. So I'll have the website updated with all that information. As Mr. Donlan had mentioned, under economic development, we are now the proud owners of a 3-building, 2-property industrial complex at 6516 and 6520 Weehee. We closed on that last week. For the most part, the garbage has been removed. There are no big issues that we need to deal with, although someone's already left some tires there already. But we're looking forward when Mr. Poloff gets back from his vacation on Thursday, we'll get that building sealed up and start moving into the next phase, which is starting to prepare to take bids for demolition of that and the bakery building. The only other thing that I had at the end of my report, and I don't know if we want to talk more about this now or if we want to think about it and come back and revisit this in December. I'd like to have a discussion with council on how we want to follow up on the strategic plan. So if you recall, there were 6 major areas of emphasis that were proposed in the draft. So we're at the point now where we need to get everybody's feedback on those items. And there's just no physical way that we can address all of those items at one time. We need to start picking some priorities. So I know this hasn't been something that we've had a lot of discussion about in the last month since we've rolled that out. But do we want to put this on the agenda for December the 12th and carve out 15 or 20 minutes to have a discussion about how we'd like to tackle this? What's everybody think?
So my sort of take on this is we have these 6 categories with a whole bunch of items under each category, which is almost unaddressable by a group this size. So I was wondering, does the administration have any input about which category should have a priority? And are there 1 or 2 or 3 items under there that we should try to tackle in the next year or so? And should we be trying to identify if there's the short-term desirable points and long-term ones, meaning like 3 to 5 years, and there are things that are maybe 5 to 10 that we have no way of knowing how we would address? I would think that would be the first step, is administration identifying what is the highest priority of the 6, and under there are there several things we need to address.
So there's a couple of different ways we could tackle this. One would be 6 areas, 6 council members. Everybody could take an area if you wanted to do that. Although I don't know that everybody has the same passion about those 6 categories that others might have. So I think there has to be some give and take and discussion among you to figure out what it is we want to pursue. In my mind, we do have some momentum already with the park committee that the community engagement group has been working with through Mr. Russo. We also have some momentum with some of the improvements that have been made in the park in the last year. So if there's an area where we have something that has direct effect on the residents and something where we've already done some work, the category about parks and recreation might be the place to start. It just depends. I think you as council members have to look at what your passions are. Because honestly, Nothing on that list. There are so many things on that list are not going to get completed unless somebody is passionate about making them happen. And that is there needs to be a driver. There needs to be, and I'm not talking about a person, but just a driving force and a focus on doing one or two things well and not trying to hit all of those things that are in that plan. I like Mr. Marks's suggestion in terms of trying to plot out timeframes for some of the things that are there. And there are some items on that list that we're kind of in the midst of already doing. So sounds like another meeting to me.
Weigh in.
So
I've said this before, one of my impressions is that one of the root things we need to do is get better at communicating with our neighborhood and getting feedback. And I think that would affect every single one of these properties. So I know there was some discussion of maybe getting one of those neighborhood apps and get that in line. I'd love to hear about that maybe at the next meeting, along with just strategizing on how we're gonna look at the big picture. Because I'd like to look at the plan again and maybe come up with some other ideas on how to strategize it and suggest that for the next meeting. But the communication thing, I hear it from people. I forget her name, the woman that came in and had all those wonderful impressions, ideas, exactly what we've talked about. It's out there, but she didn't know that we've been talking about it. And even REA's article, those are things that could be continually put into that. And I'm just suggesting that I'd love to hear about that program if we can at the next meeting, and then we'll strategize the whole plan on top of that.
I think I agree that communication with, I think probably everyone here agrees as well, that there's not going to be any kind of vote on a strategic plan unless we, feel like that our community has really understood what's in it and has had an ample opportunity to contribute to it. I think everyone's in agreement with that. I would encourage everyone, and I can probably help with this by reaching out directly to our consultant and ask that everybody get a copy of what I got a copy of, which was an example of a strategic plan that has been completed for another community. So you can look at, we're doing some, I love what the administration is talking about doing in terms of taking the plan, then putting it into like what the specific action steps are, being able to cut and paste that into people's job, evaluations, so that we can actually track how we're progressing along with the strategic plan that council has agreed upon. Into that ideal, I think it's important for everyone to be informed on what these things can look like. All right. What we have, I think, is a great draft. But I think if you've looked at it closely, there are areas that are very well developed in terms of lots of detail. And then there's some that are just like pretty bare bones. And it clearly, if you have a passion for one of those areas that hasn't been developed, we need to, we need to enlist you into to working on those areas. To Mr. Marks's point, yeah, there's probably some priorities that we should be working on rather immediately to be giving some feedback back to the administration and to council about how to move forward with all this. I think that having a example of one to line up next to ours would be very, very helpful to everyone in terms of knowing what's possible in terms of doing different areas. Park Recreation Commission, whatever, that's a great example. You don't have to create things from scratch in terms of the process of what those goals might look like and the wording, what that would look like and everything. So unless there's an objection, I think I'll reach out to him and ask him to send a copy of the one, which township was it? Harrison Township, like a copy of Harrison Township's.
And I can send that out. I have that
All right.
electronically. So it sounds to me that it makes sense to ask this group to go back and take a look at the materials we gave you, I guess it's a month ago now, 2 meetings ago. And then we'll distribute the Harrison Township packet so you can see what what an example of a completed plan would look like. And then let's schedule a 15 or 20-minute conversation on the December the 12th meeting to have a more detailed discussion about how we want to move forward. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Okay. We'll make it happen. Any questions about that process? And please feel free to reach out to me individually, because there was an awful lot of information in that draft. Okay, that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fredenoff, do you have a fiscal officer report?
I do. Before we just go through the go through the month of October, we did see this in finance. We'll try and make it a little shorter.
38, I'm gonna make some noise a second.
Sorry, not a problem.
That does not sound healthy.
It's not his skin.
Okay.
Thank you. Not a problem. So for the month of October, fiscal year 22, the village had a combined bank balance of $3.5 million, just over. Of this amount, just over $3 million can be found in the village's primary checking account. The balance resides in several village dedicated funds. That major difference between the $3.5 million and the $3 million, again, is mostly Star Fund transfers. Village had 24 outstanding payments, $77,000. That includes Deer Park Silverton. For the month of October, again, the village generated $86,000, just north of that. In general fund income tax receipts, the number was less than October the previous year, but again, we've just caught up from what we were ahead for several months. So we're now within about $1,000 of where we were last year at this time. We have there's no change in the real estate receipts. We already received our second payment. As for just village receipts, we've received 27 payments of officially $769,000. 500,000 that is a Star Ohio transfer. One of those 112,000 is the payment from Little Miami. So real numbers is about $130,000 that we collected. So that's still it ends up being a little bit less than fiscal year October. Apples to apples. The top 5 payment payees were Central Land Title Agency Company, which of course is the Crimes property. Crack the champagne. Payroll, Adlita, DPS, and Rumpke were the next 4 biggest payees for the month. As for appropriations, the total village general fund spend for the month included 80 cleared payments of about $350,000. That's $113,000 more than was spent last year. Again, that major change can mostly be attributed to the Crinus Bakery property, and the village administration will continue to monitor appropriation spend and make any adjustments deemed necessary, which leads us to we did reappropriations.
Yeah.
So we can talk about appropriations at this point. Well, we got to accept the report first, though.
Why don't we talk
Yeah,
about
we'll
appropriations during Mr. Donlan's report?
Perfect.
Well, we
That's
did the
okay.
amended appropriations.
Right, amended, we're good. So
Next
end of
meeting-
report.
Next meeting, you're gonna want the
Yeah.
annual appropriation for 2023.
The
budget.
Not tonight.
Do we need legislation for that?
We have to pass our budget, adopt it as appropriations to commence spending again January 1. We traditionally do it in our December meeting. And it looks very similar to this, but what we attach to it is the budget we've been going over with everybody.
Right. Okay.
So I've got that on our agenda for December 12th.
Okay.
Okay. So we will do that then.
We'll make
That's
sure
actually
that-
really good because there's a few typos that I found tonight that
We will pass that, waive the second and third readings, and then that'll take effect. So January
January 1st.
1, we continue to roll, pay bills, pay employees, et cetera.
love
But
doing
it's
that.
typically, we do that in December.
Okay, got it.
All right, need a motion to accept any report?
Motion to accept.
All in
Who gets
favor?
it?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Chief Kimball.
Thank you. First thing I want to do is talk about gratitude. I want to thank I hope I'm saying their names right, Epstein's residents on Vera that coordinated with Sergeant Reed to provide a meal over Thanksgiving for our personnel that were working. I know they provided one for the Little Miami guys as well. Our officers really appreciated that while they were here, away from their families.
Whole community made food. It wasn't just them.
Okay.
He delivered everybody.
Gotcha. Well, I thank them for coordinating it, and I thank everybody that contributed to it. I got my activity report to Mr. Earth kind of late because of the holidays, and I don't know if you were able to catch it online or not. I did hand out paper versions of some of the training. There's quite a bit of training as we're finishing up our year. If you have any questions about any of that, I'm happy to answer them. Our canine, the handler, Lieutenant Forrest, is still recovering, so he has not been using the dog, but the dog has been being maintained on his mandated training. So the dog is staying current, but my handler's not ready to jump over any fences or anything. So that's wrong with that. We did recover another stolen vehicle with the flock cameras. And then I have calls for service reports. I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at those. I can pass hard copies around if you'd like. One thing I noticed is some of the numbers are going up as far as activity goes, and that's attributed to us bringing our people, back to full staff.
So this report is actually online in your packet too. If you want to go back and refer to it later.
I think I'll go together.
Yeah, it's a 4-page, right? 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Five.
5 page.
Can't afford staples right?
No, I'm trying to say,
Raise the
trying to
budget.
say.
Change. This is one actually.
Chief, can you give some highlights for those of us that have not looked at the report yet?
Yeah, one thing I look at with activity is traffic stops. We don't push officers on, it's their decision on whether or not citations are issued, but that activity is a good indicator of what our guys are doing. And there's a noticeable jump in that number of stops as we're getting more people back.
Yeah.
I know in some of the other things too, vacation checks, some of the directed patrols, things like that, officers are more active. I like the self-initiated activity versus when we're called. So those numbers will always be higher when we're fully staffed, and they'll always be lower when we're not.
I know you have just going based on memory, I know you have kind of, I'm not sure what exactly the wording is, but basically psychiatric emergencies, folks that are needing some backup in that way. I think there might be more than one category for that. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
I'm always curious about that one because I know there's been national conversations about, having partnerships, which I know we already have a number established with psychiatric emergency department, and all that. But I'm always kind of curious about that area. Can you speak to what that looks like during the holidays?
That's a type of call. That's honestly one of our more common call types. The challenge we see is capturing that data. And that's up to the officer's interpretation. So we might get dispatched for a domestic and they'll enter as a domestic, but if the domestic call, its root could be, somebody having a mental crisis.
Right.
So the mentally disturbed runs we have where we're having mental crises, those are spread throughout all of these. We have conversations to make sure we try to capture it accurately, but it's a challenge. We were on a run today that could be entered 10 different ways. My belief the root was some psychiatric distress, but it's up to that officer how they interpret it, how they enter it. We do partner with Women Helping Women, the Divert program.
Okay.
There's maybe 10 agencies in Hamilton County that are part of that. We're one of them.
Yeah.
And they send people out to domestic scenes to help the victims coordinate next steps and things like that. So we're happy to be a part of that.
Yeah. I know there's a number of resources that they bring to the table, and I just want to thank you for those existing partnerships, so that so folks kind of get a sense of the depth that goes on with these partnerships. So there's programs through the, is it the Attorney General's office or the Secretary of State, where like you can have a, it's not a witness protection program, but basically you can have an alias address so that you can have your information removed from public databases about where you live and like safe housing and stuff, so that victims of domestic violence or victims of violent crime in general can feel safe in their home, that, you know, people aren't able to come after them for stuff. So,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of resources that Women Helping Women and other partners that we have can help get to people and that have been in crisis like this and victims of crime.
Yeah, and if you look at the training our officers receive in October, and like I said in the past, we'll see some of these categories repeated because different officers do it at different times of the year. But if you look at some of these topics, you'll see mental health response, crisis intervention, critical thinking and use of force incidents, communication disabilities, improving law enforcement response to persons with mental health crisis. It's a big focus of ours because we see that a lot. And if we're in front of that, it hopefully helps us have better resolutions at the end of our contacts.
Thank you for leading such a well-trained team, and thank you for all the partnerships. Any other questions for Chief Campbell? Thank you, sir.
One question.
Yeah.
Is it possible to sort this by the number of calls? Like the most calls you got this month, you know, or at the tops we can't go, so like for instance, 29 would be at the top, I think, for parking employees, and then kind of go down that way.
I might. These are kind of pre-built templates within the system we use. But I can tinker and wrestle with it. And we're getting towards the end of the year where I like to clean these categories up because I feel that some of them are redundant. And if I take some of these choices away and funnel our calls into more focused areas, I might get better data. So that's an ongoing process, but I'll see what I can do.
Just a little bit easier to, I think over time, we'll kind of see what's kind of the top of the, whatever you're saying. Anyway, I think to me it'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
I appreciate your work on getting these activity reports digestible for us. You know, that's, I think we've all seen over the course of the past 2 years, these reports getting more detailed for us. And so thank you for everyone that's been asking for that and being able to give the chief input on what it is that you want to hear. If there is anything else, I'll ask Mr. Donlin.
Thank you. We have 2 pieces of legislation which we tabled from the last meeting, and then the third, which is a new piece of legislation for discussion tonight. So first, I'd like to put on the table ordinance 2022-9, which is an ordinance establishing regulations for temporary storage containers, dumpsters, and portable toilets in residential districts. And to get the discussion going, this need a motion to approve in a second.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
What we did going back to, I guess it's either our October or early November meeting, was listening to concerns. Again, we don't want to greet someone with the welcome wagon of here's a citation because you put the pods in the street. Is recognizing there could be exceptions when a pod and a dumpster would need to be in the street. We kept the general prohibition in place, which is they're not permitted on a public sidewalk or a street. And what we did, we tied the right to put it into the street to a street permit, which is section 90206. That's where we typically govern utilities want to open the streets, construction companies that need to move into the street. And we have a category in 90206, which is the second of these 2 ordinances, to say under certain circumstances, you can petition the village administrator to place your pods, to place your dumpster in the street. We can set certain conditions on it. If we're concerned about the type and style of a pod, the type and style of dumpster, we can require it to be placed on a platform. If it's going to be in a location where we have a traffic concern, we can require traffic cones. We can put reflectors on them. we could limit the period of time. Our general ordinance allows 30 days, but maybe we don't allow 30 days to stay in the street. So what we're doing is we're keeping in place our restriction. These are not permitted in the residential district except on your lot. They must be permitted in advance. They're for a limited period of time. You can get an extension. That's the original ordinance. But when these emergencies exist or an urgent need or the practicality exists, that person can petition to the village administrator in cooperation with the chief of police to determine, yes, we're looking at what you're going to do, where you're going to place it, where it can be. Now, what if they don't come to us in advance? They just bring in the pod and they lay it in the street. Benign enforcement, go down and we say, hey, you need a permit, let's talk about this. The person can give a permit, we can do it. If they say, no, I'm not going to do a darn thing, we can enforce it. We can enforce it with complaints. But we want to make sure if they're going to be in the street, to be done safely and it's not going to damage the street. And that we can monitor it, we can know where it is, how it is. Important with dumpsters is that they're regularly serviced, so we don't have debris blowing around. So what we did was we amended the ordinance on the dumpsters, pods, or temporary storage containers, portable toilets, to say that portable containers and dumpsters can be in the street if you get a permit under 90206. Under 90206, which is the second of these two ordinances, one of the things we need to decide is there a permit fee for that? There is no permit fee for you applying to say, I want to get a pods and put it on my property. But if they're going to be in the street, do we want a permit fee for that? I left that blank. So when we get to that ordinance, we need to discuss whether there should be a permit fee. We have a right to require security. If it's a large thing and it looks like it's going to damage the street, we can say, okay, we want a bond or we want a deposit toward damages. So when it's removed, if it's damaged, we can draw on that. That's different from the permit fee. So that would be a question addressed in the second one. Questions, comments about the proposed amendment?
I know we've had a lot of discussion. This is the third reading. We've had a lot of discussion of this already. For folks that haven't tracked that, we've been discussing this for past 3 meetings. I think more than that, actually.
Sounds good to me. Where's the final draft?
That would have been sent out at the last meeting when we did not have enough to be able to pass the legislation. So it would have been in the agenda packet for November 14th, coming out on November 11th. There was a red line in there and a clean version.
Okay. What's next?
We need a motion to adopt the amendments first. And the amendments would
All the
be,
red lines are being added, right? Amended in, and then it's going to be final.
correct. So I need a motion to amend first,
Motion to amend.
Is there a second?
and that's a voice vote.
Okay, who's the second?
I think as well.
You can
You
do
can, whose turn is it? Rogers.
Okay. So is everyone done with your questions on that? Ready for a voice vote on that? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Without objection, I take that as unanimous.
And now I need a roll call vote to pass it for third reading as amended.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second from Mr. Marks. And when you're ready, a roll call, Mr. Pagnoff.
Ms. Cheney,
Yes.
Mr. Knipp,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher? That was a yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Ms. Snyder,
Yes.
Ms. Van Hart.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. It was a long process.
Well,
think we got
good
good-
process.
Yes, I think we got, I didn't mean that disparagingly. It's a long process, thoroughly vetted, I think properly amended, good legislation.
And I think we might find a lot of communities trying to script that.
Is yours the updated version
Yes.
of that? So this will go away then. I'm gonna stick that on there.
So then the companion ordinance, ordinance 2022-10, I need a motion to read that by title only.
Motion to read by title only.
Is there a second? Second from Ms. Cheney.
Mhm.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Without objection, I take that as unanimous. Thank you.
And this is an ordinance amending Chapter 902 of the revised code to require permits for any street closure or partial street closure. And I need a motion to approve and a second.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second from Mr. Marks.
And then I just kind of walk through it. It adds two areas. It adds picking up on these regulations as to when a temporary storage facility can be located in the street, when a dumpster can be located in the street, but we also add in there when a street closure permit may be granted. So private party, block party, they would actually come to the village and say, I want to close this block for a party on a certain date. Now that we know about it, we can talk in terms of safety, timing, what needs to be done, who's in charge, things like that, that we've done it, but no formal process for doing it. So this is where the formal process would exist to say, I want to close my street down for 3 hours, 4 hours on this date for a picnic. So both of those are wedded into the new 90206. And then I mentioned earlier, do you want to have a permit fee in association with that?
Any opinions?
Terry, could you ask that question again, please?
Do you want to have a permit fee?
No.
No.
No. Okay.
Without objection, I'll take that as unanimous.
Then it'll be approved in the printed version, then we'll remove that sentence in there that says, shall pay a permit up. That'll be removed then. So let's formally amend it that way, so we've got all the i's dotted and t's crossed. So motion to amend,
Motion to amend.
Second.
that's an all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that was Marks and
Ben Hart.
Van Hart.
And then what we need is a roll call vote then on this ordinance as it's written and as amended.
So this is on 22-10, right?
Correct.
So there's the original. Can you amend that?
Ms. Cheney.
Stephanie, you need to
Yes.
sign. That's nine.
Over here, and
That's different from what,
if someone
Okay.
does not agree with his, with the ruling, he comes, he wants to put down a dumpster, he wants to close the road, or whatever it is, administration says, no, not happening, but he wants to
Already signed
fight
this.
back.
you signed the wrong one.
He could request a
He gave
variance
me one.
to the planning commission.
He gave you this,
Yeah.
which was 33.
So it doesn't eliminate it, it just says this is the different route you now have to take.
I think he needs that.
So I was given this one earlier to sign. Was that a mistake?
That one's 33, Terry.
Yeah, that's the next one. No, I'll get that, we have to correct it, get it over and correct it.
Okay.
So do we have a roll call vote?
You ready?
So we ready for a roll, everyone?
Okay, Ms. Cheney.
Yes.
Mr. Kidnip went. We'll get back to him. Mr. Fisher. Mr. Marks.
Yes.
Ms. Snyder.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hart.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then I need a motion to suspend the second and third readings. This will take effect in 30 days, the same time frame as the dumpsters. That's a zoning ordinance, so it cannot be passed as an emergency. There's no need to pass this as an emergency, as they'll both come into the station at the same time by just waiving the second and third reading. So need a motion, a second, and a
So
roll call
this is
vote.
10.
This is again, motion passes an emergency?
Just
Motion to
suspend the second and third reading.
Suspend the second.
Motion to suspend a second and third reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that, understanding that typically what this means is this is legislation that we would discuss in 3 meetings. Give the community an opportunity to hear what this is about over the course of 3 meetings. And what we are proposing to vote on is to just do it in one as a matter of emergency. Any further discussion? And if not, that's a roll call?
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Cheney.
Yes.
Mr. Knipp.
Sorry, a lot of coffee.
We're suspending the second and third reading.
Roll call vote. Okay.
We missed them earlier.
No, I gave it to him for you.
Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Mr. Marks.
Yes.
Ms. Snyder.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hart.
Yes.
2022-10 passes.
And then I will send over the corrected version
That's fine.
Yeah, so we can sign it and post it with our ordinances. The last piece of legislation is Resolution 2022-33. Can I have a motion to read this by title only?
Motion.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
And this is a resolution reaffirming calendar year 2022 health savings account contributions for eligible employees and continuing the benefit program through calendar year 2023. And I need a motion to approve in a second, and then we'll explain this.
Motion to approve.
Second.
That's Cheney and Manor.
So we've had this program in place since 2018, I believe.
Correct.
Which is when we started moving toward the high deductible health insurance plan and trying to encourage all our employees to enroll in that plan. Because of the high deductible, there was an incentivization at that time with a $1,000 bonus to join the plan. And then we would match their contributions to their health savings account up to $1,000 a year, so $250 per calendar quarter. We reaffirmed this in 18, 19, 20. This is reaffirming, well, 18 was for 19, 19 was for 20, 20 was for 21. We're coming to the end of 2022. We want to make sure that we've kept it in place. This reaffirms it. And then going forward in 2023, we'll have that same program in place. So if you're a new employee, you're eligible for $1,000 when you join, if you join a high deductible health plan. Existing employee, you can set aside contributions to your HSA. We will match them up to $250 per quarter, and it gets deposited at the end of each calendar quarter. Did I summarize that correctly?
Yes, I'm trying to. So there's no monetary change in this program. It's the same program we've had for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
There's no need to increase or decrease at this time.
And we need a roll call vote.
Ms. Cheney,
Yes.
Mr. Knipp,
You signed it already.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Ms. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Van Horn.
Yes.
Thank you, signed it.
Under coming attractions, I mentioned earlier, we will do the annual appropriations December 12th. That's passing the budget, so to speak, for the calendar year 2023, so there's no disruption in spending. You've already submitted that budget to the county. County has approved it. We've passed our levies, so now it's just putting pen to paper to categorize all those expenditures and authorize the monies. The other coming attraction will be the park rules. We went over those in detail at our last meeting. We said we would put this on the December agenda so we can have the park rules in place when we get to the park season. And at the end of the meeting, I would like to request an executive session for matters of personnel related to the appointment or employment of a public official. We don't do that now, we do it at the end of the meeting.
And I see that our next, thank you, Mr. Donlin. I see our next executive committee meeting is 6 p.m. on December 12th. That's before our regular council meeting on that day. And is there any other report from executive? Mr. Van Horn? Okay. So Planning Commission, Mr. Marks. I see that the next Planning Commission meeting, as we discussed earlier, is Monday, December 5th.
My name
At
get on
6:30.
You're the council.
With the council liaison.
I'm the council liaison. Yes, we're having a meeting.
Okay.
You just found out we're having a meeting on December 5th to discuss appointments to the ordinance.
Housing, yes.
Housing.
Housing council.
Housing
Yes.
council. Yes.
Very good. Community Engagement Committee meets next on January 17th at 9:30 a.m. I'm hoping that's correct. Ms. Snyder, do you have a committee report?
I do. Just a moment. All right. We discussed a few things. I think I mentioned this already, that we want to bring back the welcome wagon. We went over some items that we think we might want in a basket. We're hoping to start that shortly after the new year. We also discussed moving the community garden, and Mr. Herf might be able to provide more detail on the location. I just know it's at the end of Vera.
Yeah, so we own 2 lots that are east of Fair Oaks on Vera on the south side of the street. Picture that.
Say this again.
Can you show a map? Do you have a?
Yeah,
map, Casey?
that's probably a good idea.
From Google Maps.
Brilliant idea.
While he pulls that up, I will just say that we are looking for a couple of people who might be interested in doing the Civic Garden Center's course that they offer for creating a community garden. I believe it's a 12-week course. It starts January 11th.
So there are 2 lots down at this end of the street.
There's a request that we do it on satellite view. There's a request that we do it on satellite view.
There it is.
No, right there at the bottom, you see where it says layers? Just click on that.
Down here?
Yep,
Yeah, there we go.
and you can zoom in.
There you go.
So this is the lot that we believe would be the most advantageous because it's the most open space. There's also no entanglement with the driveway that exists on this most eastern property. But in talking with Mr. Donnellan, we have the ability to declare this a park because it's in a residential area.
That would be good.
It gets the garden out of the shaded area up in Memorial Park. We can do some nice things here, possibly with a split rail fence, some landscaping to make it look more residential along here. I've talked to Mr. Putoff about the possibility of creating some type of a mulching area where we can put some of the leaves that we collect in the wintertime to create mulch for the use of the garden. I've had a discussion with Hamilton County Recycling about some of the best practices that we could do to start that particular process. There may be a water line on that property that would allow us to provide irrigation for the people who have gardens there. The biggest issue that we have in talking with We Thrive, which I've had this discussion since we had the meeting last week, was finding someone to drive the project. Because in Reading in particular, where they have a very big community garden that does very, very well, there are 2 people who drive that project. They're passionate about it. They do a lot of the heavy lifting to make sure that things get done in that garden. So this is a project, if we undertake this, we have to go into this with a lot of gusto and dedication to make it successful, or it'll just wither on the vine, so to speak.
What are the dimensions of that property?
Say that again.
What are the dimensions of the property? Looks like
What are
it's
the what?
What are the dimensions of the property?
It's 62 wide.
6 feet wide. So it's not very large.
No, it's not a very large piece of property,
And those are all trees on the
but
south side.
it's double, if not triple the size of where we
But
currently have.
those are all
It'd be
trees on the south
72.
side.
That's 72 wide.
They may be.
There's 3 separate lots there, so it looks like it's 72 wide.
So
I see the
we don't have to make a decision about this evening. This is
Right.
just an investigative process to see what it would take to be able to do this. Because the first thing is are we set up from a code standpoint to be able to do this? It looks like we are. Secondly, what is the time frame? What is the labor that's needed? What is the support that the village would need to put into this? Who from the residents is going to lead this? It would be great if Billy Simpson could help us with this. I don't know that she's available at this point. And I think this is where We Thrive could really help us because they've established community gardens in other municipalities. So we've started that discussion. We've got plenty of time, well, not plenty of time. We have about 3 or 4 months to make a decision about whether or not we're dedicated to want to make this move. So there has been, it seems that there has been a lot of interest in doing something with the community garden. Where it is now, it's not being used. It's just not conducive to growing anything with all the trees that are up there.
Who attends to this property now as far as keeping it mowed and all that?
We do.
We do.
Village maintains it.
And so my understanding of what was shared is that there wouldn't be any kind of, was it public hearing on on doing this on that street? Or would there need to be some kind of community feedback required?
It's a conditionally permitted use in the residential district. So if we adhere to our same rules ourselves, we would put it before planning commission, write the specific plans, we would notify people in the surrounding properties. And then planning commission would make a recommendation and council would have further public hearing and recommendation and approval. Given the fact we put other people through conditionally permitted use processes, there's some communities that believe we're the king, we can do no wrong, and we can do whatever we want. It may be a good exercise to get community feedback, just to say, we're gonna put up a fence. There's not gonna be lighting, what the irrigation plan may be, what parking may be. Will people be able to pull a vehicle onto the lot and stay on the lot? I don't even think it'd be intensive, but what it would do is show respect for our planning commission and our processes that we go through the same thing.
Yeah. Also, with respect to getting a piece of land in the community garden, the process being very transparent and open and public for feedback, even on how we're planning on doing that, I think would be important with respect to the folks who are going to hear about this after we've already given all the slots out, right? And are saying, wait a minute, I'd like to be, or I'd like to be a part of this. How do I get a slot next year or whatever? And we're able to answer that kind of stuff. So thank you for your work on that. Yeah.
We Thrive is holding a healthy cooking class in the village. I believe a date was chosen after our meeting. Do you recall?
I want to say, no, I don't.
Okay, well, there will be
I'm
more
gonna say-
information forthcoming. It will be free. It will be here.
What's the time?
I
In a month, in 3 months?
I think they wanted to start in January. I don't know if
Okay.
they were able to.
I want to
work
say it
on
was
that.
January, either 7th or 14th.
So this is more
But-
information.
Don't write that down.
This is more information that will be coming from We Thrive. And speaking of We Thrive more generally, we are down a navigator, and our second, our remaining navigator's term ends at the end of this year, so very soon.
And she's planning on moving.
And yes, so effectively there will be no head of We Thrive, and unfortunately the stipends were just for starting up in the village, so there is little incentive for someone to step into that role. So we need to start thinking about the momentum that was built there and how to sustain that given these changes. I spoke with Casey just briefly after our meeting and about the disconnect between the residents that show up at We Thrive and then how we as a council work with those residents, or how we all come together, because a lot of residents think, oh, you have this committee called a community engagement. That means we should be able to come and talk. And that's just, not how our formal committee is run. So I wanted to put it to this body that perhaps we have a meet and greet, a very informal, if that's allowed, just meet and greet council with any residents who would like to just come and talk to us informally.
What's the hesitation with allowing folks, because I know that, I mean, as an open committee that has to have quorum and everything, my understanding.
I mean, they're welcome to come, but it's
Right,
not just like a back and forth loose conversation. There's an
register.
agenda.
Yeah, they can register to speak.
Yes, of course,
Presumably,
as
yeah.
they can here, but
Okay.
there were some complaints about it meeting
Okay,
during working hours too.
so that makes sense.
So-
Right, yeah. Okay.
Just something to ponder, and maybe early spring we can have a little meet and
Yeah.
greet.
Yeah.
Well, I
With
think
people.
the idea that Brian used to engage people at the park was a great idea, just lousy weather.
That's
You
true.
know, it's just the timing. That it could become an annual spring and fall tradition that we engage people in that way.
Yeah, I think it would be really great if at that meeting too, we had, sign up if you're interested in the welcome wagon, sign up if you're interested in X, Y, and Z. So if we had a way to present that very informally too.
I'm thinking if there is such, I mean, I would defer to the discretion of the chair. But in terms of looking at going into next year, even format changes of the committee, let alone the time, but just the format of the committee having a specific period of time set aside for public comment, so that if anyone comes to us or to the chair's attention saying, I want to be able to speak to the committee, it's just, we always have that time set aside. And if no one's registered to speak, or if no one shows up during that time, just looking at the format of that. As you all know, through December, maybe you don't know, but we do committee and chair assignments in the new year. So anyone who's interested in moving away from the committee that they're on and being involved in something else, please let me know through this next month here, and as well spread the word to the community that this is the time when we can do it any time, but this is the time where we like to make those announcements. All right, thank you. Is there more?
No, that is all.
All right, very good.
So since we're talking about next year, we'll have a draft calendar for the council meetings at the next council meeting for council to take a look at, so.
Let's see. So, Ms. Cheney, do you have an education report?
No report.
All right.
You used up 4 months last.
I'm sure you would enjoy that.
You saved it up for the new year.
You betcha. I got 2 meetings coming up.
I'll get you that early tonight. I'm going to end those meetings. Reporting.
You wanna come?
Report and school reports.
Mr. Fisher, I'm presuming no nonprofit report. Any nonprofit report? Mr. Van Harn, I'm just asking because I know of your involvement in one. And as I said, I have a number of things about resources that I spoke to. Anyone interested in those community-wise as well, just let me know, or a member of council. And Finance Committee met this evening. Ms. Cheney, do you have a report?
Yeah. Mr. Breidenhoff already gave the finance report and the appropriations report. The only other thing we discussed was the ARPA funding that we got. 187,000 we've gotten twice. So the total to spend would be 375,000. So far we've given extra cash bonuses to the employees for working during COVID. That was $40,000. The playset replacement, we used $45,500 towards the playset that we bought out of this money to go with the grant that we got for $50,000. The communication tool, this is the app that we're working on. We haven't released it yet. It'll be an app for a phone, and that's $10,000.
That was already spent?
Yeah.
It says August 2021.
Yes.
That was, that's the basis of it. So there's an additional $10,000 upon delivery that we would spend.
All right, I thought that I had made it clear that I've worked in this domain before and would like to see who were spending money.
I was
with.
given that instruction after that commitment was made, so we stopped the project.
All right, well, didn't ask for a stop in the project, just to be involved and have more transparency with the council on it, because I think we're all very excited about the ability to communicate with our residents. I was just surprised that the money was spent last year. That's all.
We had to spend it in order to get started on it, right? No?
I don't know.
Oh,
Go in there.
I thought you said no. Okay, so the other planned expenditures, we talked about lead pipe abatement to reimburse and possibly reimburse residents who've already paid for it. LED street lighting, I think we discussed that tonight. Okay, and then Wi-Fi for the parks at 40,000. The AED installation in police vehicles would be 20,000. Communication tool, which is
It's the other
the
half.
same
Part
app,
two,
but
part two, right?
Part two, yes. And the solar campus project, which we're not sure that we can even use the money for this. So the other things that we discussed were maybe bus stops and a walking path to pave it in the park.
So an explanation here, the 57,555 is likely not enough to cover a solar project, even if we were able to spend that money. And Mr. Donald and I have talked about this because you're a part of that committee that's taking place with the Center for Local Government. There's a question about whether or not those dollars can even be allotted to solar projects because of the politics involved in it, essentially.
Yeah, there's been some, my understanding, you can correct me on this, is that there's been legislation that was passed, I believe, that said that if that communities can vote to say, we don't want solar projects, where you're not allowed to vote to say that you don't want gas or other utility projects, but you are allowed to vote and say that you don't want solar projects. I understand it's a state.
I haven't seen that passed, but there may be something that's in the hopper here at the end of this session
Right.
to prevent communities from having solar panels or windmills or anything
Right.
else.
Yeah.
I can
I
find
thought it
out
was
more.
really interesting that
Mostly it's
it's against the
guidance
law
from
for a
ARPA.
community to say, we don't want your
Yeah, this
pipeline
is
here,
what
but
ARPA,
you're allowed to say that about solar projects.
this is what ARPA will allow us to spend money on. It
Okay.
issues like 4 general categories for replacing lost revenue, for employee enhancements like this,
Community health and wellness.
community health and wellness, and the other was specific utilities to water, Wi-Fi, but not solar. These were the 4 preliminary categories. And they keep rolling out regulations every few months as to what is an acceptable category. We have legislation in place that says we can spend it on whatever are the allowable guidelines from the federal government and report them as appropriate through the village administrator. So we've got the flexibility through 2023 if they open the door on this to spend it. The other question that's out there is this enough and will this project go forward? This was a cooperative project through the Center for Local Government, where I think we started out with 8 communities and we're down to 3.
3, yeah.
And so the question is whether or not we can get any bang for the buck by 3 communities joining together on a bid. That was a question originally was posed out there because so much of this is labor intensive and unique to the location, is what is the common commodity that we can save on? So that kind of stalled out after, I think that really after Mr. Carroll left, who was the driving force in Silverton for it. It's still on the table to maybe do a cooperative bid with 3 communities.
So the other note to point out here is that we did allot $40,000 for lead pipe abatement on the private side, but in our last conversations we've had with Greater Cincinnati Waterworks, they are actually funding that now. So there was no guarantee that they were going to fund it for residences that were not a part of a road replacement program. We don't have any confirmation on that yet, but that $40,000 might be available to do something else with it.
Right.
So the good news is that we have until end of 2023 to spend this money. As I had said in our finance meeting before, if there are projects that council members have an interest in, you need to let us know that so we can look at the ARPA guidelines and see if there are things that will fit in there. I think the discussion with Mr. Anderson from SORTA is timely because some of that sort of money may be allocated to doing bus stops, if that's something that we have an interest in doing.
Yeah.
We just need to know what the cost is going to be.
Yeah, my hope was that this was something that SORTA had funding for our community, that we wouldn't need to be matching it. I can get clear with him on that, but my understanding from the beginning on this was not that this would be coming out of our budgets, but this is part of what SORTA
this
has
could be
funded
matching
for their bus
funds
stops.
if
Yeah.
indeed we do need something.
Yeah.
So the timing on this is really good.
Hey, Ron, can you speak to the Wi-Fi?
If you have a signal.
Huh?
If you have a signal.
I'm not understanding what the 40 grand is.
So the Village of Lockland did a program where they bought repeaters and broadcast modules and provide Wi-Fi to the community. The issue is
Why not just the park?
correct. So the issue is, I think it's something worth taking a look at, but you have to sustain it once you build it.
Right.
And we can make the $40,000, probably $40,000 would buy the equipment that we need to put Wi-Fi in our two parks. The issue becomes if we would want to expand that throughout the neighborhood, which some communities have done in cooperation with the school district. So CPD, be interesting to see where they are with that program. The issue is we don't want to build something that we can't sustain, or that we're going to have to turn off in a couple of years because we can't fund it. So there's a guy that I've been talking with at Cincinnati Bell who's supposed to be coming back to us with a proposal for what the cost would be. We do have Wi-Fi in the park now, but it's only to power the cameras that we just put over there. So if you want to go over and stream, you can't do that. So this would be like next level phase 2 kinds of stuff that we would want to do there.
What would you have to do to be able to stream from?
You have to buy the equipment. Essentially, we'd have to find a place where we'd have to find how to protect it.
I mean, I've looked at it just from the standpoint of being able to stream for events and stuff like that, and bring music in and stuff like that. That's why I was looking at the $40,000 figure, and I was like, I'm thinking $400. So I wasn't quite sure. It sounds like this project is looking community wide.
It's larger than just the parks. We
Right.
may narrow down to just doing our parks once we see how complicated or how involved it is.
You're bringing Alta Fiber in to discuss that? You're bringing Alta Fiber in
Yes.
to discuss that?
Yeah.
Because the fiber is all around, so.
Have you heard if there's a lease program to support something like this? So it'd be-
A lease program?
Yeah.
I'm sure that's an option.
Okay.
When you're just to back up for a second, so the one project that we have the most information on right now is the LED street lighting. Do you want to talk a little bit about your findings financially on this?
So, the LED street lighting, it is a year-old quote that technically expired back in February, but, assuming that the costs aren't exorbitantly more, they quoted us this 111,841.62. The current monthly cost for our electric just to keep the lights on in the streets is $23.33. That would be brought down to $732 a month. So that's an annual savings of just north of $19,000. I mean, those numbers already, 17% return on investment. You're talking about paying for the project in 6.5 years.
That's a lot, that's super powerful.
Yeah.
So, of all the great things we're doing, we talked about the Star Fund. Star Fund's only going to pull in like $15,000 next year. This is $19,000 in a year. So, I mean, to me, this is a great use of money. I understand there were some questions on LED lights of their effect on the environment and on people at night. I think that it's definitely something worth looking into. But I mean, the cost savings here, this is massive.
And the other thing that I think is helpful is there are comments out in the village that the lighting is not bright enough. And I know on our street on Canterbury, we have this one horrible orange light on Canterbury.
It's over by your house.
Say what now?
So it's over by your house, right?
And it's by your house.
Yes.
For my house, it looks like it's at your house.
All right. At your house.
But
They know where they live.
It's exactly halfway.
This may sound crazy, but it's things need to match, It's not just a matter of lighting the streets, it's the quality of light. It's the LED light is brighter. We aren't going to be using as much electricity. You know, it seems like it's a project that we should move forward on.
Yeah.
So-
It indeed, I believe everyone has probably had, I mean, speak up if you haven't had your questions answered on this. I know that in terms of going over appropriations and everything, this was one of the areas that I spoke with the fiscal officer about. It does seem like a no-brainer in terms of the amount of money that we'd be getting back. I mean, think about all your pet projects that you're interested in, that you could, petition council to be using that money for that we're saving every year. I think it's definitely worth going forward and investigating more. I think you've all probably discovered in your own homes that there's a great variance in terms of the types of LED lights, and some of them you do not like when they're inside your house, right? But then you discover, oh, there's this other kind of light that is better and it's LED and saves the same amount and everything. So I think it would be very prudent to, definitely investigate. So that,
You can
because
change the color with Alexa. It's really neat.
purple lights during,
I think that option is double
remote
remote.
There's a fire emergency, they all turn red.
Right. So
Only on the streets towards the fire.
Exactly.
Yeah, tell them where to go.
Yeah.
So do we offer direction to do another quote, or what did you say?
So we've asked for an update on these numbers to see where we are currently. It's probably a good 6 to 8 month process to get it started. We'll report back to council as soon as we hear what the update is.
One thing you might ask them is that I know utility companies or many, they usually have an ongoing replacement program, not just when they burn out. Like they'll do it every X amount of years or month, whatever it is. So there may be a way to say, let's do half and then have an agreement that from now on, everything gets replaced as LED.
Well,
Maybe you'll have an
if we
idea
pull the
what
plug
the schedule is.
You pull the plug.
and buy the equipment, it'll cost $111,000 if we just do it today. Okay, that's the last quote that we got. You can do it over a 10-year period too, kind of like we did the road project. The issue becomes, do we want to, if we have other things that we want to use this capital on, do we want to use this money that was ARPA provided to just take care of the capital costs on this, or do we want to take the risk and only do half of the cost or a quarter of the cost and then have to pay for the rest of it out of the general fund later if something happens to funding? So it seems to make sense to just go ahead and get the equipment now while it's not our,
do we have
on
to
our
spend it
dime.
all by the end of 2023?
Yeah.
Is that it? Because I know sometimes what communities will do is they'll take like a block, right? And it's just like three street lights, right? And do that on it. And how much would that cost to do 3 street lights where we're just going out and buying the bulbs and replacing it and getting community feedback on, hey, is this cool? We're about to spend $111,000 on it.
so we're actually split into 2 zones. One zone runs from Amberley to Bremont. The other zone runs from Bremont to the corporation line at Langdon. So we have 2 separate Duke accounts because of that. So one is a $55,000 account, the other is a $55,000 account.
So do they pay for the replacement of the lights, or is that part of our?
We pay them a maintenance fee every month, which includes the replacement of the lights.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be the same process. So if you have a light that goes out on your pole, you as a residence would still contact Duke Energy and they will come out and service the light.
So
Well, my point is, you might be able to say, what if we put 55,000 down to do half of it? What's it look like through attrition? And what's the cost of that over the next to replace the rest of the lights?
Let's
For X
have,
amount of years.
Yeah, I think
That's the kind of planning that I think should be considered, because we might be able to maybe say, hey, we can save another 30 for something else if we do it this way over X amount of years.
I was thinking the whole thing at once seems like to make the most sense, especially if it has to be spent by the end of 2023.
Yeah.
I just want to have a sample of I want the residents to have a sample of what it looks like, and whether, like, if they're, the research talking to them and maybe I'm just pulling this out of the air, but can we ask them, how many different types of lights do you have that are LED? What do you recommend? What are the top 3 that you recommend? And can we see those? I mean, can you bring them in and show it to us? We can all walk out because it's night tonight. Can we walk out there and you can show it to some kind of test before we're spending $111,000 on something that residents may be like, we hate this.
So I think-
I'm sure you could find
I
out where
think-
they already installed it, and whoever wants to go could go down
Yeah.
and check it
Yeah.
out.
I'm also pretty sure they have a coded lumen requirement per square foot. Because
That's
there's a
all
point
the-
at which it's too much, and there's a point that's too little. They're gonna say it's already.
They have all the lamps they put in are very similar. They have different colors.
Yeah.
And people say, well, that was not as bright. No, it's a different color.
Yeah.
And your eyes perceive colors differently.
Right.
Just like when you go in your house, you put a daylight light in that's
Yeah.
5K
Mhm.
versus a 2700. Your eyes go, I like the 5K because that's
Yeah.
what your eyes want to see, it's daylight.
Right.
So they will probably put, all the LEDs I've seen are the daylight end of the Kelvin spectrum. So
Okay.
Yeah, so
they're not going to give you a choice what LEDs. Just like they replaced the light on the pole at Monahan's house, it's a different color than all the other lights on.
Right.
Well, and I think that's what happened with that light on Canterbury.
Yes.
I'm
With
not,
the replacement.
we got to figure out which light we're talking about. I know when I went out to look at the eclipse, there was one light that was really bothering. Like I had to, when taking pictures of it, I had to like
Block.
get an angle where I could block that light so then I could actually get a picture of the eclipse. And
So moving on.
Okay.
Well,
Off the tangent,
so
it sounds
so
like
we know
we need to get a new
hold on a
quote.
second.
So here's, if we are agreed that we want to spend $111,000 or that it's in the ballpark, I think we move forward with Duke Energy in terms of getting the updated quote and then see what kinds of options they can show us, if there are options,
Yep.
on what this lighting might look like.
Yeah,
Move
and
forward
are
from
they,
there.
they're replacing $111,000. I mean,
No,
they're not just
they have to
replacing the
replace
bulb,
fix- they have to
right?
replace
Yeah.
the fixture.
They're replacing the head.
Because you have a different power supply for an LED than you do multi-vapor lamps.
Yeah.
So they will replace that head.
Okay.
I doubt that it might even be a new pole. They might bring the support pole and the head, attach it and
Right.
wire it. I mean,
Yeah.
they'll have to tell you that.
Well, so we'd be having Alta Fiber come in and talk
Duke.
It's Duke.
come in and talk to us about, sorry, I was thinking about Wi-Fi
Yeah.
still.
That's a
Yeah.
good point, too. I didn't think-
Oh,
Well,
street lights out. I think you have internet access.
Okay, great.
We have to. Yeah, there's not the same power
Well, you
supply.
said you wanted to be able to change to
Yeah,
purple and
we
blue.
need
right?
Alexa on
So,
every
yeah.
pole.
It's like when we relamped this building, we had to put new power supplies in.
Yeah.
because we wanted-
So we need to see
Yeah.
updated numbers and then see if there's anything else we'd rather spend that money on, to Roger's point, than this. And then if there is something else, if there's stuff like in the park or in the community, that we wanna spend that, we'd rather spend that $111,000 on, then we can
Well-
look at that, but
And I would qualify that by saying, we can say we'd like to spend that money, but we have to qualify it to what
Right.
the
Yeah.
ARPA guidelines
So
are.
I'm just saying, we updated costs and to make sure that's where we wanna spend that ARPA money, and if we can spend that ARPA money. Because if we can't, we probably still wanna look into doing this regardless. But we gotta get this hard numbers.
Yeah.
The end.
So that's for the next meeting then, or is that too soon to have an update from
If
the
they
numbers?
will
We'll figure it out.
update as soon as we get information.
Um,
And they'll have all the specs on the lights, the lamps that they're putting.
It's getting harder and harder to get people to interact on quotes. And especially now since we're getting to the end of the year, so.
Going back, we jumped from the Wi-Fi over to the lights, and I know that there was still a couple questions. At least I had one of the questions on Wi-Fi. It went to that point, to the point about what equipment is, precisely about what 40,000 is being spent on equipment wise. I know we have a lot of folks that are familiar with how to create Wi-Fi networks and the kinds of stuff that's involved in doing that to the point that, someone says they could do it for $400. I think that's accurate for like a park and stuff. Ultimately, it's where you're getting the feed and the bandwidth, and we've got Alta Fiber all through the neighborhood at this point. So it seems like I'm just wondering how many people are looking at this topic, and if it's something that we can bring the folks who know, council members who are familiar with this, into the conversation on the investigation of that project. Does that make, I don't know where you are I don't know where the administration is at the point of looking at this Wi-Fi thing. I know I've been hearing about the possibility and been excited about the possibility of this for our community for a number of years now. I know Ron's been working on it. But I don't know, like, when you meet with them and if it's something that we could have Alta Fiber come in and talk to us about the plan. Is that something that we're in agreement that we'd like to hear? Am I the only person that would like to hear from Alta Fiber about how a plan like this would work?
I would like to hear.
Yeah, minimally, I'd love to see the parks. Then, of course, what does it look like for the whole community? Obviously, what is the burden to Gulf Manor if we're gonna carry it, either through a lease or buying the equipment?
Yeah.
And until I have that information, I can't. That's all I can say is the question, not.
What's a better idea of like how many residents actually already have it? So are we just duplicating efforts, 75% of them already have it? Is that something we want to spend
Yeah.
$40,000 on?
Well-
That's my question is who are we doing this for? I think most of the community has internet or capability of internet.
Right.
And dealing with Wi-Fi, it's a forever evolving door where before we know it, we're gonna have Elon Musk's shooting down on the entire United States, wherever you are, you can get
Starlink.
Starlink,
Yeah.
Starlink, and who knows what. If we're just gonna, by the time we actually get this up, it's gonna be outdated Wi-Fi like we've been seeing in the past years, and maybe it's just not worth to let everybody deal with it themselves, how everybody does, and gets their 4G upgraded to the 5G and all that. Or we figure out when Starlink does come out, if we wanna give to our community for free. I don't know what the reasons for that is, or in the park we go free. I don't know how the system's gonna work, but we also have to look at the future, because the future of Wi-Fi is gonna be way different than what Wi-Fi is right now. So it's a developing thing, and I know like how much work we should be putting into it and trying to go with old information instead of looking into the future and what's gonna be in 5 years and see how the world is gonna have Wi-Fi then, and instead of us wasting money into it now.
I think that's an excellent point. And a lot of times, what I kind of hesitate about is when what I hear is a collective voice saying or implying that we've got to be doing this from scratch, like in terms of research on those very questions from scratch, when actually communities around the country are having this exact same conversation. And a lot of the research has already been done about like, okay, well, when we first put in cable into the neighborhoods for cable television, how many years did that last for? All right. And then the next version of that cable had a half-life of, less than that. And with regard to how quickly technology is turning over, they've got charts on that kind of stuff. Right. And then they've got, so there's lots of stuff in terms of educating our council that may not, be tracking the conversation very well. There's lots of folks that we could bring in to have those kind of conversations. Again, with respect for the administration, we've got a 2023 deadline on how we're spending some of this money. We're not going to solve it all tonight, but it is conversations that we got to continue to have. And I am conscious of the time this evening. So is there?
I'm cold. I didn't put
Okay.
this on because I want to leave.
All right.
Well, I mean, not that I don't want to leave, but.
You're smart.
I appreciate what Mr. Fisher said also, and I think that information, if that was part of what comes back to us, to me, it still pushes that, at least I want Wi-Fi in the parks. That may be a part of making this.
Well, and to reiterate the point as well, and I guess it probably answers some of what you're saying about who are we doing it for. There are answers to that that have been discussed nationally with regard to schools. All right, so if we have 100 households in Gulf Manor, or when I say households, I don't just mean physical structures, but talking about apartments and stuff that have kids in them that have poor internet service because of the different tiers now and the way that they sell them and everything. If we're able to offer a higher tier for free to kids that are more and more dependent on the internet with assignments that they get at school and everything, that might be who we're doing it for. That's the rationale that's been used in other communities. But again,
Let's
it's
get the information.
yeah.
Yeah, but the federal grants that are going around now with those that have kids in schools, we can get high-speed internet for either free or for.
Right. And
$12 a month.
Correct. Those do exist to the extent that you have a provider for it. All right. And if you research that, and I have thoroughly vetted that through a nonprofit that I'm involved with, the first year and a half that was available, our local providers didn't know how to do it. All right. They did not have the program available. Like federally, they were saying this is available, and locally in a city the size of Cincinnati, they weren't providing it. All right. They didn't know how to do it. So it took it a while for it's done. A lot of things are done at the federal level, and it takes a while for the local monopolies to figure out how to put it into play. And then it depends on the wiring in those neighborhoods, right? So a lot of the money has been about not just the discounts to residents, but because they don't have Alta Fiber in their neighborhood, using those funds to those providers to be able to upgrade their systems and everything. So yeah, lots of nuance in it, right? Ms. Snyder, we've taken up your time, haven't we, with your?
No,
I'm
we were on
sorry. I'm
finance.
sorry, it was on
We're on
finance.
finance.
No, we're done.
Sorry.
Yeah,
All
we're
right.
done.
It's after finance, everybody.
Executive session.
Executive session. Do I have a roll call vote for that?
Yeah,
For
a
matters
motion
Make a motion
for
to
personnel,
executive session.
for
Second.
appointment
Okay.
of a public official.
We're gonna take a brief break, bio
Grief
break.
Did you say grief
A
break?
grief
A
break?
brief break for
So we
the,
have to close out the stream.
yes. And before we close out, just an explanation for those watching the recording, then executive session is one in which we meet privately for, in this case, matters of personnel or appointees or other folks.
Public official employment or appointment in the category of personnel.
Right, so we will meet privately, which means that we darken. We will come back likely to just close the meeting. So
Did we take our roll call vote?
we have not yet. We had a
Yes.
member that left, but I believe we would still be able to pass it without him. So we'll
Yeah,
go.
we have a quorum.
Yeah, we have a motion
bathroom
from
forum.
Ms. Cheney and a second from,
Had a motion from Mr. Marks and a
Mr.
second
Marks.
from Mr. Knipp.
okay, sorry.
Ms. Cheney,
Yes.
Mr. Knipp,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Marks.
Yes.
Ms. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Van Horn.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we're here.